Hello, I'm James Preston and welcome to another edition of Executive Corner Expert Talks on 𝐊𝐿𝐴𝐚 TV. Today we're shining a light on SavvySME, an online platform empowering business owners to make smarter decisions, attract more customers and find the right connections to succeed. To talk more about the company, Jeremy Britton, a SavvySME influencer in consulting and strategy, now joins us. Jeremy, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, James. Thanks for having me on.
Well, Jeremy, great to have you all the way from sunny Brisbane, looking beautiful in the background there as well. Now, I've had a little look about SavvySME, and one of the things you talk about is flick your rich switch. Now, one, how do I find this switch and turn it on, as I'm tired of not being a millionaire? And more to the point, how has this helped your clients achieve more health, wealth and happiness?
It's an interesting psychological thing. Like, a lot of people will actually say to you, success is 80% attitude and psychology and 20% strategy. But most of the business books that you pick up are just teaching you more and more and more strategy. So, I think there was like 100 million people who went out and bought the book, The 4-Hour Work Week. But how many people are actually working a 4-hour work week? And it's one of those things where it's like, what you believe is possible is possible. If you don't believe it's possible, then it doesn't matter how many strategies you learn, it's not going to work for you. I wrote an article a couple of years ago called the Amish Eye-Opener. And as we know, the Amish don't have access to TV and technology. If you went and asked these guys, what's the fastest speed you can go? They can say, I can run at 3 miles an hour, or I can get in my horse and go 12 miles an hour. But once you take them to the city and show them they could go 60 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour, they start to think, okay, this is amazing. This is totally different. And the interesting thing is with my field, with investing and things like that, you say to someone, what's the best investment return you can get? And they say, I get 3% income on my stocks, or, last year my cryptocurrency doubled. But then you go back to the Amish guy and you say, what's the best investment return you can get? And he says, well, I can plant 1 ear of corn and I can grow 2,000 ears of corn. So he's making 200,000%. It's all about perspective, and once you understand how the mind works and how you've been conditioned by your society, then you start to realize, a lot of us went to school. A lot of us, we were taught by employees. Most of our parents were employees and taught us the way to get successful, the way to make more money is to work more hours because you get paid by the hour. But someone who's got an entrepreneurial mindset, who was brought up by Richard Branson or the boys from Google, knows that you don't have to work more hours. And this is the thing that Tim Ferriss' book was about. You could work 4 hours a week and still make thousands and thousands of dollars, but you've got to believe that you can. And most of us have been conditioned so much by our society, we've been conditioned so much by our upbringing and our schooling system, that we literally don't think it's possible. If you don't think it's possible, you're not going to be looking for ways to do it. And whatever strategies you try are not going to work. So it's 80% mindset, but the trick is actually getting the mindset. And this is where I've had 13 of my own startups. I've learned a lot of stuff. I've been a business coach for many years. But the thing that really opened my eyes was actually doing courses in hypnosis and meditation. After I was highly stressed as a financial planner and sold my business, I just wanted to take some time to relax. And hanging out with people who were Buddhist monks and psychologists and this sort of stuff. And you know yourself, you can hypnotize someone, convince them they're a duck or a chimpanzee. And I wondered, what if I could hypnotize someone to think they were a millionaire? And then they would start reacting to the world differently. When they're walking down the street and they're seeing shops closed and going, oh, it's really sad that business closed down. But when you're thinking like a millionaire, you go, there's an opportunity. Perhaps I could get this shop rental cheap. Perhaps I could start a new business in this area where a business just closed down. So I actually studied a diploma in hypnotherapy in addition to my diploma in financial planning. And I started to hypnotize some of my clients just as an experiment, like what could possibly go wrong? And some people increased their income by more than 5 times within a space of 6 months. Some people tripled their number of clients within a space of several weeks just by thinking differently on a subconscious level. It's really quite amazing.
Well, Jeremy, I've always been really interested with what Peter Powers, for example, does and being able to hypnotize people on the spot and then go to sleep. So I actually think I would be volunteering to have you hypnotize me if it means I can get 5 times my worth. I'm all about that. I've seen Office Space as well. Very fun movie. It also, you know, changed the entire perspective of the people involved with it. But you're right, so much of it comes down to perspective. We've talked in the past, for example, about the 4-minute mile. The first time that was done, it was seemingly impossible. And then once it was done, we had, I think, 12 people do it over the next 12 months. So it's all about, as you say, mindset, perspective, and then moving on from that point. So as part of that, we have to move on as well to exactly what you're doing. I mean, you've mentioned it as well, talking about being a business coach. So let's delve a little bit more into some of your coaching hints and tips. What are the telltale signs of a great business coach in the modern day? Does it have to, for example, involve things like hypnotizing people, or is it still built on fundamentals?
Hypnotizing people is a very valuable skill, and if you can find someone who actually balances their left-brained analytical mind with their right mind, then that's fantastic. If you can get someone who does that, there's not too many people out there with twin diplomas in different fields. But there's a lot of people, unfortunately, who can go away and do a weekend course, and you know, in a weekend you can learn to become a real estate agent. In a weekend you can learn how to become a business coach, but there's not very many people who have actually got the runs on the board in those. So I suggest to people, you know, when you're choosing a business coach, ask them the question, what other businesses have you owned apart from being a business coach? Because you need someone with experience in retail and service and different hospitality businesses and things like that, and has actually run their own business apart from just the business of being a coach. And one of the other things is, you know, I've found out myself, it's very easy to start a business. It's comparatively easy to keep the business running, but the really difficult thing is being able to sell a business. So if you can find a business coach who's managed to build a business up and then sell it as it's still going, that's absolutely gold. Well,
I mean, you've simplified it a lot more than I actually thought you would, based on the hypnotherapy sessions we were talking about.
I can give you more if you like.
But that's very much straight down the line. It actually seems quite simple when you think about it that way. But if we also have a look at some of the tools that we see super wealthy people utilize. I mean, you mentioned there, one of the goals is to obviously build up a business and then get it to a point where it is saleable, which is a very important point, because if no one's buying it, then you can't make the money. So what are some incredible tools that are used by super wealthy people worldwide, which you believe others can draw inspiration from?
It's definitely a mindset thing. And, you know, a lot of people read the book Think and Grow Rich and go, you know, I can just think about things and I'll grow rich. But you're thinking from your old perspective, which again is being an employee and being taught by employees how to become an employee. So the original title of the book was, I think, Meditate and Manifest. But back in 1937, the Catholic Church said, you know, we don't want to have an author talking about meditation, because meditation at that time was a Hindu thing and was a pagan thing. So he had to change the title. But if you read the book very closely, he's talking about, imagine you have a boardroom and Thomas Edison is sitting there and so-and-so is sitting there, and visualize this. It's actually meditation techniques and hypnosis techniques. It's not just about thinking. So you're trying to tap into a higher consciousness of what would Richard Branson say to me? What would Thomas Edison say to me? That sort of stuff. So it's amazing. I had a radio show in New York for 2 years, and every week I would interview amazing people who'd achieved amazing things. And one of the first guests was the only Australian guy on The Secret. Everyone remembers the car park guy, a good friend of mine. But I got to talk to millionaires and I got to talk to billionaires. I actually interviewed Arnold Schwarzenegger and a few other people. And because I was a meditator myself, I asked every single question who was on the show. I asked them how they built their wealth and what they did on a daily basis. Then I asked them, what type of meditation do you do? And a lot of people had never been asked that question before. Now, we know now that Oprah Winfrey meditates and she pays her staff to come to work early and meditate. We now know that Hugh Jackman meditates twice a day at sunrise and sunset. And when he's filming a movie, they have to stop production for 30 minutes so he can get his meditation in. I asked Arnold Schwarzenegger what type of meditation he does. And Arnold Schwarzenegger has been a transcendental meditation person since 1976, I believe.
Wow.
I got to interview Jarek Robbins, Tony Robbins' son, and he does a different type of meditation. Every single person I interviewed, whether they were athletes, whether they were millionaires, billionaires, regardless, high achievers in life, every single one did meditation. They just had different techniques. And it's really fascinating for me as a meditator to find out these people who've been able to transcend what was possible financially, what was possible for them physically, by utilising the power of the mind. It's really amazing.
Well, I think it's a really good point, because one thing that will happen if you don't take a bit of time to just pause and consider what's going on around you is you do get caught up in the rat race. And much like we can sort of hear in the background there with your dog, you'll end up chasing your tail as well. So I think you really do need to, just take that little pause as you're talking about and find the gap, and then ultimately pursue that and what opportunities that can come from it. So really interesting point there, Jeremy, especially mentioning all those incredibly successful people who have done so. Just before I let you go, we have now entered into the new financial year, but there are still quite a few businesses who are lagging on getting their taxes in order. What's the best way businesses should calculate their taxes, and how should they know the amount of tax that they should, that they should pay?
Well, there's a couple of different answers to that response, James, and it depends if you want to be one of the average business people or if you want to be one of the elite business people. I learned all this stuff going through financial planning education, but I learned a lot more from my clients than I actually learned when I was training for the position. So for the average person, I would suggest setting aside 20% of all income they receive. If you've got rental properties and things like that, have a separate sub account, and every time the rent comes in, you take 20% of it, set it aside into a different sub account. Now that sub account will be used for repairs and maintenance and that sort of stuff, expenses. If you don't have repairs and maintenance, obviously then you're going to be paying more tax. So then you've got the money set aside, 20% there is set aside for taxes. Obviously, if you do spend money on recarpeting or reupholstering or whatever, then that money comes out of there and you'll be paying less tax. So 20% is a good rule of thumb for most people in most situations. Obviously, for Australian businesses who have to pay GST and things like that, that'll have some funds up your sleeve. But if you want to join the elite club of the multi-millionaires and the billionaires, most of these guys pay 1% tax. Google, Apple, Microsoft, PayPal, these kind of guys, they pay significantly less tax simply because they know how. So that's also an interesting thing that I've learned from my clients as well. Once you understand this, then you can legally pay less than 2% tax. And then people start coming at me going, oh, how dare you? But look what Google does for us. Google pays almost no tax to the government, and that's fine because they didn't support the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and that sort of stuff. But Google gives us Google Maps for free. We've got Google search engine for free. We've got Google Translate for free. And they've been developing a lot of these technologies which they give away. And some of the people who don't pay significant amounts of tax are incredibly generous with what they do because they just don't trust the government to spend it in the right areas. I'm a pacifist, I'm a Buddhist, I don't support wars and things like that. So if I choose to deliberately, legally manipulate my tax down to subatomic levels, that gives me the freedom to go and sponsor children in Africa and do good work around the world. We've sponsored over 200,000 kids in the last 10 years to get an entrepreneurial education rather than a school-based education. So they can actually learn how to run businesses rather than learning how to work for someone else, because that's really the future and the freedom that we all want to have.
Well, Jeremy, I think we'll have to have you back on to talk about that specific issue, because that's really interesting how you can, as you mentioned there, break it down to a subatomic level of having to pay tax, which I don't think there's a single person in the world who wants to be paying more tax. We all want to do what Jimmy Carr did, but just not be caught. That's probably the key thing. But just before I let you go, Jeremy...
That's the way. Obviously, the big corporations do it legally, and that's why they can manage to do it year after year after year.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, any final thoughts you'd like to add? It's been a really interesting chat.
I'd suggest, again, people chat up a business coach. Don't be afraid to interview 3 or 4 of them. Find out what businesses they've sold. Find out if they've got some sort of spiritual, psychological practice behind them as well, because that's going to be the one that makes a really, really big difference. Most people think, oh, if a business coach increased my business by 50%, that's great. But what if 500% was possible? As you said before, like for thousands of years, we thought the 4-minute mile was impossible. Then the moment somebody did it, all of a sudden 11 other people did it the next year. And now Olympians, you can't even get into the Olympics unless you can run under a 4-minute mile. So finding out what's possible and what's possible in your industry, because if there's someone who's making megabucks in your industry, if it's possible for them, it's possible for you. And oftentimes they're not smarter than you, they've just got a different perspective.
Mate, that's a great way to finish up. If it's not possible for them, it's not possible for you. I love that. Now, final thing, where can we find you? Where can we find what SavvySME is doing as well?
SavvySME, you can find them. Just do a search for SavvySME. You can find me at 24hourwealthcoach.com. So that's number 2, number 4. I don't do a 4-hour work week. I do a 24-hour work week. I've been doing for about 16 years, and I'm happy with that. So yeah, you can find me on all the search engines and Googles and social medias, and SavvySME as well. So very happy to be a member of those guys, and learn a lot from them, and hopefully I can give some back as well.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to chat.
Thank you, James.
Well, that's Jeremy Britton, a savvy SME influencer in consulting and strategy. And if you missed any part of our chat, or you'd like to browse our extensive catalogue of expert talks, simply head across to the YouTube channel 𝐾𝐞 Media. That's it for now, but remember, stay apprised and invest wise with 𝐾𝐞.